You're gonna let me, with 140 miles on the car, go to a drift event, which is notorious for cars getting battered up? And he goes, yeah. So a few months ago, I was invited by Ford to go drive the new S650 Mustang GT. I was very excited about it because getting a new Mustang is pretty rare, right? Years go by before they either give it a facelift or a chassis change or an interior change, anything along those lines. There's never been a bigger jump of the Mustang since the S197 to the S550, in my opinion, which is the live axle platform going to the IRS platform. The interior is better, everything else is better. So the S550 Mustang went from almost one of the most hated Mustangs at first because people didn't like how it looked, to the most modified one of all time, right? Because people understood that it's cheap, affordable horsepower, and it just works. The Coyote engine's a beast, it's great. Fast forward to the S650, I have a pretty open-minded expectation. Like, I bet it's gonna be the S550 just with a nice nudge. That's kind of what I think it's gonna be. So I fly out to California, review the S650, and it's about what I expected. And that's in a positive way. I thought the big screens were going to be really distracting, but it wasn't that distracting. I thought they would kind of glare to my face and be a big problem, but it was fine. Drove it around, and I got to briefly test the new factory drift brake. And what that is right where your manual e-brake would go is literally a drift brake that Ford installs in the car with the performance package. So with the performance package, you get like better suspension stuff and brakes, stuff like that, but you also get the drift brake. And to engage it as an electronic e-brake, you just bop it. Fly back home, put out the review, everything's good. But then I get a call from Ford to say, hey, listen, would you like to come to the Dark Horse event? And if you don't know what the Dark Horse is, it's basically just one step above the Mustang GT, which is pretty rare for Ford to release the upgraded Mustang that quickly, right? Usually it's like a couple years before like the GT350 or something like that comes out. So people are kind of skeptical about the Dark Horse, and I was just kind of bummed because I wasn't going to make the press event. I had an obligation that weekend, and I was kind of devastated because I knew people wanted to hear my opinion about the Dark Horse because people know me as Mustang guy. Even though I have Hondas and 240s, people still see me as the Mustang guy. I'm really bummed about this, but then my friend Jeff from a company called 777, they do aerodynamics on Mustangs and also do development for a whole bunch of other stuff. Honda Civic Type R, things of that nature, A90 Supra. They go, listen, you might be in luck because we have one on order. So if it is in time, we'll just bring it to you. I go, that sounds awesome. So I go about my business for about a month. I fly all over the place, do my job, and I get a call going, hey, it's gonna be in Atlanta at basically the dealership in Powder Springs. When are you grabbing it? They go, Saturday. I go, I can't on Saturday. So another obligation. I'm up at Linear Raceway doing some stuff for a drift event I'm planning and just kind of mapping some things out. But then I get another phone call from Jeff, and he goes, well, why don't we just bring it to you and you drift it at the drift event you're at? I said, you haven't even bought the car yet. And he goes, no, we're in the showroom floor right now. We're signing the paperwork right now. I'm like, you're going to let me, with 140 miles on the car, go to a drift event, which is notorious for cars getting battered up? And he goes, yeah, we're going to tear it apart anyway. I'm like, okay. And he goes, and then we'll just review it tomorrow. It's fine. So they drive up the hour or so up to Linear Raceway. We meet up, and then they go, all right, all you have to do is shout us out and describe our company and what we do and go drift. I go, this is crazy. And unfortunately, when I did the drift brake in the S650 review, they let journalists do the EcoBoost because for obvious reasons, I could see things going wrong in the GT. So they let us kind of experiment with the drift brake, but I hadn't experienced it, one, in a manual car. I did actually with an auto car out in California, and you had to do this kind of weird technique where you like get on the gas and just rip it and steer. This, I felt way more at home because it felt like a drift car. But here's the problem. Brand new Pirelli tires, like the brand new P Zeros or something. It is The Dark Horse is not meant to be a drift car. It's supposed to be a grip car, right? Kind of like the Boss 302 of old. So I'm thinking to myself, this thing is gonna be super grippy. So I'm gonna have to be kind of mean to it. And I don't wanna be mean to a new car, but here we are. So we get out there, we line up, and you just see people's faces like pointing at us going, what is happening right now? That's a Dark Horse. It's not even the GT. Because 2 weeks before, Vaughn Gittin Jr. and Chelsea showed up with brand new S650 Mustangs at Linear Raceway, and they were in old man makeup to try and disguise themselves. But we all knew who they were right off the bat. But yeah, they went out and proved that it could be an awesome drift car to have. Some people are like, oh, cool, let's see how the Dark Horse does. So I start with figure eights, go out there, and it is just not going. So I was like, oh, stupid traction control. Turned off the traction control. Bada bing, bada boom, it starts doing perfect figure eights. And I'm just like, this is wild in a brand new car, and the drift brake actually works extraordinarily well. The only difference is that it's electronic. You'd think that it'd be really, really bad compared to like a hydro. But the thing about a hydro is that typically you kind of bop it, right? You go in, you flick, and you bop it. You usually don't want to hold on to it too long, because if you do, you'll flat spot a tire or chonk a tire and you have a bad day. But the thing with the Dark Horse was it actually had this built in, I don't know how they do it, but it feels like it has resistance, right? And as you flick in and rip the e-brake, you kind of count to a beat, like 1, and then it does it. So as you flick in and go, boom, then it turns in. And it took me about 3 laps to really get it figured out. I think that was really extraordinary that somebody could literally go to the showroom floor and go drifting instantly. And remember, I have no angle, no alignment, no anything to make it easier. So there's not a lot of self-steer. So basically when I wanted to transition, I just give the wheel a little nudge. I go out there, I do 1 more lap, and it goes really well. I almost linked the whole thing. And then I think the traction control at one point was like, dude, what is happening? It's like, are you crashing? So it kicked back on its own. Well, we pull out of the track, and then the actual owners of the car, 777, are like, well, we don't do a lot of drifting, but can you help us out? I kind of want to try it. So we have people have pretty much never slid a car before. We go out to the little practice pit that they had that day to do figure eights, and both of them got it, like within probably 15 minutes. So it took them about 4 tries to get it. So think about that, like in a brand new car on super grippy tires, you do have 400 something wheel horsepower. That does help. But that initial bite of the tire, you have to really mentally get through that in order to get to the good part, right? To get the tires nice and greasy and get it to start sweeping around. And one of them had a ton of karting experience, and the brother had a lot of like sim experience. And it's really interesting how a lot of these young kids are coming into the drift scene, and they're kind of nicknaming them sim prodigies because they grow up playing Assetto Corsa and learning how to drift in there. And then they get to the real thing, and it only takes them like 5-10 tries because they have this kind of motion to come back. For me, to go back to a sim is way harder because you don't have the G-forces in the feel. But it's so fascinating to see people in a brand new car with no angle, the factory drift brake that, Chelsea and Vaughn were really hyping up. Like, that would have been really bad, right? If they were hyping up this new product with the performance pack and it was just kind of a gimmick. Because the Focus RS, you could get an optional drift brake, but nobody really knew about it. You would have to go through Ford Performance. But this is from the factory floor. And I think that's what's so neat about it. The next day, we took it up to the mountains, did a full-blown car review, handled it like a champ, and it really kind of showed me that the S650 is a great chassis. It did both very drastic motorsports to a degree on the street. Very, very well. I'd love to drive one on a track. That's what I kind of missed out on. But at the end of the day, the Dark Horse isn't dynoing the numbers a lot of people thought it would because it makes 500 crank horsepower. But tuning hasn't been unlocked yet. The ECU hasn't even been unlocked yet. And I think with the 10-speed especially, it's going to be a really quick car. And also, the Dark Horse has a Tremec manual gearbox if you want as an option. And it feels phenomenal. So as a driving experience, Dark Horse is pretty cool. And at the same time, if you're just looking for something out of the box to go hooning in, it's pretty spectacular. If you just put an all season on it, maybe change your alignment, you're done. You don't have to do anything else. And that's why a lot of people are grabbing S550s from Copart, or they're grabbing even other more expensive cars and just doing the very minimal things and never having to worry about maintenance. And that is what that dark horse proved to me, is not only did Ford Performance say they were building a pretty solid chassis, it delivered. And it might sound like I'm being a fanboy, but I was hypercritical on this drift brake, right? I was really like trying to find the flaws in it. It does exactly what it says. You pull it, and as you steer and clock in, you start drifting. It almost grips up so well that it almost feels like you have training wheels. It's really bizarre, because as you flick it in and pull it, it just kind of, your wheel speed, even if your wheel speed starts getting bigger, you have so much grip that you're just kind of floating along. And you go, oh, okay. And then you just go this way. Meanwhile, if you're an old like E36 or something, you're like screaming for dear life, as you flick it back and forth. But at the end of the day, dark horse at a drift event, 140 miles, amazing experience.
For a limited time, Glossett's best ever DIY ceramic coating deal is back. Last year, too many of you ordered it and it broke his site for a little while. But now, just the first 2,000 of you can get Glossett's $150 bottle of graphene ceramic coating for just $69.99, and you get a free $50 bottle of their ceramic detail spray, which makes the application a breeze. So click right now at the link in the description below to get yours.